Hello developers, this is McCINDUS and welcome to my HeroEngine tutorial number 1 for world building. In this video tutorial series we're going to go over the many tools available for HeroEngine that will enable you to design and develop your 3D world. This first video is going to cover the heightmap tools available to shape the heightmaps as well as to manipulate them into creating many different types of landscapes. First, what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to delete this heightmap that's available here. I'm going to use this selection tool over here. You can also push number 2. And we're going to select this heightmap and delete it. I'm going to show you how to create a heightmap from scratch using the terrain tools. Now if you click on the terrain option up here in the toolbar, it comes up with another window here, this terrain window. We have a few options at the top of the screen. The first is to create heightmap. We'll just create a generic heightmap like the one that was just below my character's feet. This create grid, however, will create a custom heightmap to whatever specifications you decide. I'm going to select a 64 vertices by 64 vertices area. I'm going to use the default 64 by 64 preferred size and click OK. Now this position the heightmap wherever my camera was placed, and that's essentially how HeroEngine will function for the most part whenever you place assets. So I'd like to go here over into the properties window and select position, and I'm going to just change that to 0, 0, 0. And that'll place my heightmap right in the center of my world. Now that we have a much larger area to work with, I'm going to go ahead and show you some tools. But before that, I just wanted to explain that this grid that I created is not going to necessarily mimic what you have in your game. There are many different ways to create your heightmaps and seamlessly link them together in HeroEngine. There are many tutorials available through the forums at forums.heroengine.com. And I will provide some links in the description of the video to make that a little bit easier for you guys to find. You really want to lay out your world as best you can based on the limitations of your gaming construct itself. So what I'm going to do here is just go over these different tools we have available to edit the heightmap itself. First, instead of starting over here with the grab tool, I'm going to move over here to this vertices selection. Now this is one of the most powerful tools we have available in HeroEngine, which is why I'm going to go over it first. I can go here and use my selection tool and select a block of vertices, and when I do that, everything that I choose to do in the game as far as editing is only going to affect what I've selected, which is pretty fun, pretty interesting. It makes it very easy for you to develop pathways in your game. But one thing you do have to be aware of is that once these vertices are selected, these are the only things you are going to affect when you move your mouse cursor around. You'll notice that this vertex mask popped up, and it gives you the indication that everything you're going to edit is only on these selected vertices. Now we can also go down here to this window that popped up with brush and import when we selected that. And you'll notice that here we have what we can use, what we can utilize with these vertices selection tools. Right now I'm not going to use any of these. I'm just going to show you that you can actually invert this. Now everything I'm going to do will only affect everything but the vertices that I had selected before. Now I'm going to clear everything, and you'll see that I can now select the rest of my heightmap. A lot of times if you use select vertices and forget that you're using it or accidentally don't deselect everything, you will not be able to edit your heightmap, and I've run into that before myself. It was a pain, and all you have to do is make sure you're back here and you select clear for your vertex mask. So now let's go ahead and I'm going to show you these editing tools. Over here we have the edit height tool. Now this is kind of a grab feature. When I move over here I can grab an area and pull or push it and create little hills, mountains, and valleys. This does create very bulbous shapes, and so you don't really want to make use of this for mountains. What I normally use this tool for is to generally just construct the overall shape of what I'm going to be working with for my world. So I will be moving around. Let's make a little bit of a mountain range here. Maybe an idea that there would be a pond or lake over here. And I'm just going to use the mouse wheel tool to make this larger or smaller based on how I'd like to push and pull these areas. I can make it nice and small and just pull up a single vertex, or I can grab a much larger area, and you can see it creates a huge swath over the area. It does have its limitations, but if you notice over here in the brush section, as I move that mouse wheel up and down, you'll see this little slider moving back and forth. That will affect the size of the brush. Over here we also have a slider, and this affects the strength of the brush. If I zoom in a little bit closer to look at the brush, you can see that there's this little white and blue pencil that I have. That's my grabber tool. If I hit Control and use my mouse wheel, I can actually slide that up and down and change the strength of how much I'm going to affect the terrain that I'm manipulating. Now, this tool doesn't really give you a good example of this, but it's very functional on a lot of the sloping and texturing side of things. So now let's go ahead and I'm going to show you a little bit about the brushes. We have this fall off and shape. Fall off just affects the roundness of how much I'm affecting. When I pull it this way, it goes more of a peak, like kind of a conical shape. And then if I use the plateau function, it'll just pull up everything directly. Now the problem with this, you'll get a lot of texture stretching, so you will, if you use this feature, you'll have to use it in conjunction with some of the softening tools in order to eliminate some of these artifacts that you'll pop up by using these tools. Now you can also change the shape of the tool. You can change the shape of your brush to a square, and this will actually help things edge and whatnot. One thing I do want to bring up is that we have this visualization section which will show you vertex color. Currently there's only white, but if I grab a color from here, I can actually paint this color around on my height map, and it will affect things. Now, I will go over that in my terrain tutorial video, but for now I'm just going to turn that off. And I wanted to also show you that we have this toSteep function that shows you where my character cannot cross. These are areas that are too high for my character to actually travel over, which enables me to actually create some interesting blockades and to prevent my character from being able to see and or interact with things on the other side of this mountain here. Now the last feature over here in this brush section is this fill area, and we have right now everything selected with solid, and that's just going to grab everything in my area that you see in this white field over here. If I change the drop down to Perlin noise, you'll actually see that my texture changes. Now it's hard to visualize, so I'm going to pull this back, and I want you to see that when I change the size by holding shift and moving mouse wheel, you can see the scale moving down in the brush pattern area over here. And you can see that that's actually scaling up and down that brush pattern. Now when I use this to affect my world, it will only affect what the black and white texture that I've imported here. Now this is actually the default Perlin noise texture, but we can go here and select our own texture, and you'll notice that down here we can then change this file directory and go into our repo here and pull out whatever noise map we've decided to use. Topography maps work great, noise maps work great. Essentially it's something that just gives you a little bit more randomness to what you're seeing. So let's go ahead and go back here. Now you'll see I can't affect anything because I don't have a custom terrain brush yet loaded. I'm just going to go back to Perlin noise, and let's see how that actually affects things. I'm just going to grab this and pull it straight up, and you'll notice that it only pulls up certain portions of what I have and brings that back down and pulls it the other way. So this is actually really helpful to add some noise and some realistic elements to your mountaintops and to your areas that you have here. You don't want to go crazy, it just kind of depends on the area. In a wasteland you'll have more activity. In the dunes area you'll have a lot less noise and a lot more shape to your area. Let's just go a little crazy here. I'm going to give you an example. Now you can use this in combination with your other tools. It becomes really interesting when you use these tools in conjunction with each other. I'm actually going to use my solid fill right now and make my mountain a little more extreme over here. There we go. So now I'd like to go ahead and show the next tool that we have available to us, which is this raise and lower tool. This raise and lower tool is actually really helpful. Anything that I grab, it kind of will sculpt. It will pull it up and shape it with the contour of how I move my mouse around. So you can see how that's working here. And if I go over the same area a lot, it'll keep rising, making that area rise. If I make it larger, it'll do the same thing to a larger area. Do it to a smaller area. I can also hit Shift and do the inverse and actually pull things down and kind of sculpt my way through my landmass that way. That tool is actually extremely functional. I really enjoy using that raise and lower tool to create hills and valleys. Now this right here is the level and ramp tool. This tool is really helpful for creating pathways, for creating ramps. If you notice, as I move my mouse around, this blue ring will be my level. This actually will match wherever I'm moving to my height map and create this level or ramp from that area. So if I do it from up here at this mountain peak, it will flatten this area, and wherever I drag, it'll continue that wherever I want to move it. Now this can cause some severe tile stretching, so you really have to watch out how you use this tool. But what I love about this tool is if you hit Shift, it shows you a plane. And that plane you can then either tilt or you can rotate to create different kinds of ramps and different effects as you go. And that will also be wherever the blue ring is coming out of your height map. So let's just make this ramp down. And that's how you can smooth things out and make things a little bit more easily accessible in your game. If I go this way and then turn my ramp this way, I can actually create some really interesting places in my world. Now this next tool we have here available is the Soften tool. This tool actually is very, very functional. It really deals more with erosion and softening of the edges of your textures. This is something you can really have a lot of fun with. There's all sorts of different features here. We can do dune smoothing, which will actually smooth out a lot of our excess corners. But it does have its own style. If I use Soften, we get a little bit of a different effect because it's pulling things from around the height map and averaging them out. If I go here to Hydraulic Erosion, we get some different effects where we get some planes that are drawn through. This will also create some texture stretching, so you have to watch out how you use that feature. Slope smoothing will smooth out whatever slopes you have available and create some nice mountainous areas if you want to do that. The more you move it around, the smoother things will get, so you can go a little bit crazy. We have several different types. The Canyon Carver is one of my favorites because it takes a lot of your heights and leaves them intact and then carves things out to the base level of wherever your plane is. Mean level is actually very interesting because it'll take the average of all the levels around and smooth it out. This is really good for when you accidentally build little crevices or you have vertices that are poking through in places. Instead of just using smoothen, you can use the mean level and it'll take an average and actually be a little bit more believable. You can also unspike things, so when you go crazy with the Perlin noise feature, for example, I can go here to unspike and soften and click either here or on the soften brush and then smooth out those spikes, and you see how it softened all those edges. Now it didn't really do a lot, but it got rid of the spikes that were there. Now we have push and pull we can also use. This is a very interesting feature when you start using noise brushes. As you can see, the world kind of bubbling in and out. If I use the solid texture, you can see how that kind of pushes and pulls the local area. It does some interesting things. If you just want to tap it a few times, it can create some smooth and interesting environmental details. I would like to mention that in the erosion tools, we do have our own limiter here as well. to where it only affects certain things. This will affect most. This will add edges only certain places. And it will only affect certain things at different heights. It's actually very helpful if you have some spiky areas and you're looking to add erosion and you want to make sure you don't do some tile stretching. Oh, and we're probably going to have some stretching over here. You notice we're going to go to too steep, and that'll make some of my areas pretty obvious. You can see the stretching happening over there. I'm going to click soften, and I'm just going to soften things up so we don't stretch the texture as much in that area. I'm going to do that over here as well. Anything that's close to the ground is going to be obvious to see texture stretching in. Everything higher up in the mountains that you wouldn't normally have access to, you can kind of get away with stretching at whim. So now we have some other features over here. We have this cut height map feature where if I use the mouse wheel it'll change my axis. And I can split my height map into multiple segments. And this only affects my front or back height map now that it's split in two. So let's just show you how that split things. We now have 3 height maps we can select. My first height map, let's just move that up a little bit. And now what I can do here is I can then use this tool over here, this Stitch Edges Together healing tool, and I can actually stitch these height maps together in these places where I've cut them. This is also very helpful when you want to place other height maps together and seamlessly link your worlds. You just need to experiment and see what will work best for you. Let's see here. Let me make sure I've undone. There we go. Now the next feature I wanted to go over is this cut holes tool. Now this is really helpful when you want to cut a hole in your height map for access to some kind of portal or a hole or a bottomless pit or some kind of cave entrance. By the way, if you have too steep selected, it will not show where you've cut. So there's my holes that I've cut, and if I hit shift I can actually heal those. There is one more thing I wanted to go over before we were done, and that is this brush limiters section. Over here in the brush limiters we have this slope here that we can either choose to have soft or hard edge on, and this will actually show us what we will affect using our tools. Now this actually is very helpful with terrain and whatnot, but it can be very helpful with building your world. For example, let me use the side slopes. And with these, I'm actually going to go ahead and use the soften function and have this only affect the vertices. Now you'll notice when I move my mouse over, the places it won't affect actually don't get highlighted. And we'll see how this is affecting the area over here. I'm going to use soften. And everything that is being highlighted is being softened. Now I can also do the opposite and have everything on the top only be affected. And with this, I'm actually going to do something a little interesting and make everything around that area just sink. Everything that's flat, I'm just going to be bringing down. Create some interesting effects through your height map that way. We can also change this to a hard or a soft edge. This is a soft edge. The hard edge will affect things much more drastically. This is a lot more obvious when we're using the terrain tools, so definitely stay tuned and watch for those. We also have a altitude range that we can use. So anything above this height won't be affected, and anything below this height won't be affected. We can also snap to vertex. We can affect everything only in this selected node. So if we have other height maps adjacent to this, this actually won't affect them. So there's a lot of really interesting limiter options we do have here. We can enable the upward or just the downward side of that limiter. These other tools we have available here, this clone stamp tool and further on, these tools are really designed for terrain and for beautification of your world, and they're not really things that I'm going to be covering in this video. The next video I will be dealing with texture splatting as well as good techniques for normals and specular maps in HeroEngine. I'll also be talking a little bit about DDS textures and the DXT file format. So stick around, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, this is McIndus, and I hope you enjoy your HeroEngine experience.